As the official healthcare provider of Minnesota United, Allina Health is focused on keeping our loons in top condition. And with expertise in orthopedics, sports medicine, heart care, and more, Allina has the team to keep your family in the game too. The experts at Allina Health take the time to get to know you as a whole person, helping you achieve wellness for your mind, body, and spirit. It's an altogether better kind of healthcare. Learn more at allinahealth.org. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sound of the Loons, presented by Allina Health. I'm Kyndra D. St. Aubin, and today I get to be joined by the one, the only, Mr. Callum Williams, who's joining me, I believe, from his New York City chateau. I can see the walls, the art. You must have been to some fine theaters and art museums in New York since you've been spending time there, I can tell.
Well, that's putting it very, very politely. I think we might have got on these from a garage sale, actually. So
that's even better. Why waste your money? That's how I feel.
I agree completely. No, everything is grand, Kyndra. New York City is wonderful, and my chateau, as you very eloquently put it, is now full of love and laughter with our 7-month-old daughter, and everything is sensational. And it was a really, really interesting few months over the last period of the year. A lot of traveling and everything, as you're more than aware. But yeah, everything's good. How's things with you? Everything okay?
Good, but I just want to ask you, have you stepped on any squeaky toys in the middle of the night yet? I mean, you haven't gotten to the stage of Legos lying around. You know, you always see those memes and those things about people stepping on those really painful Legos, and they make special socks and shoes for when you use slippers when you get up in the middle of the night. You haven't gotten to that stage quite yet.
Not quite yet. There's plenty of squeaky toys around, and there's plenty of things to fall over. I actually fell over something when was it, a couple of weeks ago. I don't know what time it was, 3, 4 in the morning, whatever. You know, you're sort of trying to ninja, because our daughter is still sleeping in our room. She's still of that age, and we're just trying to ninja around at whatever time of the morning it was. And me completely forgetting there was whatever it was on the floor. I tumbled completely, went down face first. Tried so hard.
What did the baby stay sleeping?
The baby stayed sleeping.
That is you have a full new appreciation for a sleeping baby in these moments.
Oh, that was a success in itself. But then, do you know what the really irritating thing was I went to the bathroom and everything, came back, got into bed. The moment my head hit the pillow, she woke up.
She's like, well, Dad's already awake. Might as well.
Be awake. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Those are all good times. I know some people used to ask me or say oh, that was the best age. That was the best age. I was like, no, every age was the best age. There's no bad age. There's every step in the process of whether it's you being up and having sleepless nights, it's still the best stage in the process.
Yeah, completely agree. Like I said, right now, my daughter Lily is 7 months old, and she is now an actual human being and is, interacting, giggling. We just sent her to daycare yesterday for the very first time, and I was I was a complete and utter puddle. I was a mess. It's just, it's crazy, isn't it, how everything changes, and my concept of reality and life has just completely done a 180. And you just would do anything for this little human being, wouldn't you? And handing her off to a stranger, I had very mixed emotions about it. So it was crazy. And yeah, like I said, it was not the best version of me. Let's put it that way. I was a complete and utter mess.
But I think that's a great version of you, because that just means that you have, real feelings and real emotions. And, I mean, that means you're a great dad. That's a good version of you.
I think it confirms that I'm a human being. I think maybe is the main thing there. But no, look, it's been awesome. But lots of traveling over the course of the last couple of months, which is, as you're aware, is hard when you're away from the little one. mentioned to you off air moments ago, there's several commitments that I've not been able to do and not wanted to do as well, because it's an important time in their life, isn't it? The first year, it's such an age where development is critical, and it's a situation now. I remember when we were working with Minnesota United, I would always remember when we were flying commercially, and it was me, you, and Jamie on the road, and you and Jamie would always fly back at 5, 6 in the morning or whatever, and I used to think you were nuts. There was no way. I was thinking, as people know, I enjoy a beer. I enjoy getting the crew together, production crew, commentators, everyone. I enjoy getting everyone together on the road after the game, and even on the Friday night before the game. I think it's important. Camaraderie is important on the road when we're on the road as much as we are. And so I always used to enjoy, experiencing the city wherever we were on that Saturday night, which meant a little bit of a later wake up call from time to time and whatnot. And there'd be times when you were already back in Minnesota, and I thought you were mad. I thought, no way, that's crazy. I'm never going to do that. Now I find myself on every 6 a.m. flight that's possible. So it's crazy, but it's part of it, But listen, talk to me about traveling, because it's been a bit different for you over the course of the last month or so. You've not been traveling domestically; you've been traveling internationally. The Women's World Cup is a humongous global event, and it's been down under over the course of the last couple of weeks. I, as an Englishman, am delighted with how it's gone. But talk to me about the experience of commentating on the Women's World Cup on site. You were texting me a couple of pictures after I asked several times, by the way, not happy about that. And the experience looked incredible. You were in Sydney, Brisbane, Adelaide, I believe. Talk to me about football in Australia and how the Women's World Cup has been.
Well, first of all, I have to say, it's when you do anything like that or those sort of events, and especially when you get to be on site for them, because I've done, both. I've done it both ways. In 2019, I was in Los Angeles calling the games off monitor. I didn't have the privilege of being in France for that one. And then obviously in 2015, I was in Canada. Even though I was based mostly in Vancouver and didn't travel around Canada until the very end to Edmonton, it's still like you felt like you were a part of what's going on. So when you speak of sort of that camaraderie feeling too, when you just are seeing these people every day in the hotel and you're going to breakfast and, seeing everybody sort of recapping what's happened the night before and what's the day ahead and what's everybody's schedule and what game do you have next. And seeing like Heather O'Reilly or Carly Lloyd or Ari Hinkst and Rob Stone and Alexi Lawson, all those people just eating breakfast at the same time and sort of just meandering. I will say one day I went up, I was in breakfast and there was Mia Hamm and I was like, okay. Like that was like that for me, the 99ers, where you're like, that's like the real, no offense to any of the other very nice people that I get to be in and around, but when they're more like my age group, but when I see like a Mia Hamm was at breakfast, that was like a real moment for me just to see her. But anyways, it was like, you just sort of you feel like you're part of a big event and there's a Fox set and there's, you have to go to like a security briefing and a meeting and you get this and you get that. And there's different things that come along. Oh, the car is going to pick up at this time and whatever else. I mean, they do it an incredible job considering the amount of moving pieces that they are taking care of and managing. And maybe you got to see some of the games since you were maybe up in the middle of the night with Lily, because that's about the time zone. That's about the time the games were on. But no, it was fantastic. And my broadcast partner, John, who I had never worked with before, I've worked with him one time, called a game off monitor, a Copa America Femenina game last year where he was in Portland and I was in Minneapolis and we called a game. That was the first game I had ever done with him and haven't done one since, aside from being sideline for the Eastern Conference Finals and MLS Cup. So tremendous. Going back to your point about family, I mean, he's got a wife and kids. They're back in Portland, or they're there now. But so he totally understands and appreciates the importance of FaceTiming, and you're on your way to this and you're on your way to that, and trying to spend time and trying to find that balance where you're together with your production team, but you're also trying to navigate that. So I don't have a negative thing to say about the entire experience. Sydney itself in Australia was amazing. The people are incredible. It does help that they speak English. So like you're in this other country, but yet you feel like, okay, I can figure things out. I can read a sign. I can communicate with people. I can order my coffee. I can do whatever else. I'm still confused about the driving on the other side of the road. I don't want to call it the wrong side of the road because it's not wrong. It's just different. And then there even people walk down the left side of the sidewalk. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
okay, is that normal for you? Because
That's
I
normal.
came back that it took me like weeks to figure it out where I wasn't running into people. And then I got back to LA and I was I was still walking on the left and people are running right into me because they're on the right. So I had to get used to going back to that direction. But no, I mean, it was fantastic. The crowds were amazing. I mean, every stadium, the energy, everybody locally, you know, if they didn't have a horse in the race and they weren't cheering for a specific country, showed up big. Every airport we landed in, you know, between Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, and of course Sydney, the flying in and out of those places, you know, the signage, the billboards, just everything really got behind the whole tournament. So it was a lot of fun. It was cool to see the Matildas go as far as they did. It disappointed that they didn't make it a little bit, you know, they missed some chances and some opportunities, but England has kind of grown into the tournament as it got along, because I'll tell you what, the first England game I saw, I was like, oh geez, they don't look great. And I did that game. But they've grown into it. So it was fun. It was amazing. And I think the biggest thing is like, I was just talking to someone this morning about it, is we talk about parity all the time in MLS. I mean, the parity and the competition level within this World Cup, as everyone's thought the quality would drop off the more countries you added and things like that. And I think it's been, at least for the Women's World Cup, has totally been proven opposite, in that the quality of other countries that don't have as much support and aren't as, you know, well ranked in the FIFA rankings as some of the others, have totally stepped up their game, and the quality of the play itself was like next level, and really thoroughly enjoyed that piece of it. I always cheer for the underdog, but now it was like you would go into a game not really legitimately not knowing who was going to win that game. And I think it proved accurate, as you saw Jamaica get through, and Colombia, and some of these countries, South Africa, Nigeria. So it was a lot of fun.
What was the most exciting game that you commentated on, Kay?
Well, I would have to say, and it's John Strong asked me and our researcher guy Eric this after our last, maybe it was our last game. Oh no, our last game was in Sydney. So it was like one of the days we were sitting in one of the airport lounges or something, and I think it was probably South Korea, Germany, because of the implications of that game and the energy behind it. And even though South Korea knew they were, you know, they weren't moving on, but they had a point to prove. They had kind of not done what they wanted to do. I think there was a lot of criticism. The coach was like really hard on them, which I wasn't like necessarily a huge fan of him and his like body language on the sideline and whatnot. But and then knowing that if the Morocco, I believe it was Morocco, Colombia was going on at the same time, and that if, you know, South Korea was just playing for pride and for a result at that point, but Germany needed a result, and the energy and the craziness down the stretch of that game and the energy in the stadium, and seeing then Germany, I don't even think all the players on the field knew that Morocco had beaten Colombia, and that the fact that Germany didn't get the result, they were out in the group stage. So it was like they didn't know that. And so watching their emotions and reactions, because that just doesn't happen to Germany. And, you know, so I don't know. I think that was probably one of my favorites. The Colombia England game was really cool in the sense that it was 75,000 people. It was probably 70-30 Colombia fans. They had just followed that team, and they were so passionate. There's a huge Colombian population in Sydney and in Australia. So the energy there, and sort of what the game itself wasn't the best game I did, but I think one of those that just the energy in the stadium was pretty fantastic. So, but honestly, we would go into every game going, gosh, there hasn't been a game yet where we look at our schedule and we're like, this is going to be kind of a clunker, you know, or like a weird, every place you went, the energy was just so great. And you bring the energy, whether you're calling it off a monitor. Even some of our games at the IBC, the broadcast center, you know, would be at like 10:30 at night, 10 o'clock at night there, because of them trying to get it in a good time for back home and for the rest of the world to see. And you still, you know, you just find a way. And when it's a great game, it's like, you know, and it's a World Cup, you know, it's a big moment for somebody who's watching. So that's kind of how you have to go into it, whether you're doing a high school game or whether you're doing, you know, I remember doing college games, and like, I feel like when the Pac-12 network started, the only people watching were someone's grandparents somewhere, but like, it's a big deal to them. So
for sure.
that's kind of how you have to go into it. And this is a World Cup, but it doesn't matter what time it's at, wherever it's being shown, like you come into it with the same kind of enthusiasm and energy. And it was a lot of fun. I have no complaints.
It's whatever the game is, it always means something to somebody for sure. And there's a wonderful passage which is on social media and various different parts of it, with a commentator called Peter Drury, and I agree wholeheartedly with his sentiment when he suggests that the game, whatever it is, means something to somebody. So when you are scheduled for a game that on paper may not necessarily be the biggest game, I think it is our jobs as broadcasters from an editorial point of view to make it that biggest game. But also it's important to have the understanding that, look, it means someone to someone somewhere, whether you're a Minnesota United fan, Chicago Fire fan, Portland Timbers, or you're the national team, you're the follower of the South Korean national team or something along those lines. It doesn't matter. It means something to somebody always. I think that's an obligation we have as broadcasters to make it feel important, even though it's from a statistical point of view and on paper it might not be. I think that's a bad way to look at it, to be honest. But it didn't feel, Kay, as though there was any unimportant games. There can't be unimportant games at a World Cup. But whilst we're on this subject, I want to ask you about, clearly there is more pressure in the women's game than there ever has been. And that's a good thing, in my opinion. So what now for the United States? Because exiting in the round of 16, to my knowledge, the earliest they've ever exited a World Cup. What next? Where do they turn to now?
I think, and I know MNUFC just officially, handed in his
Right.
resignation and whatnot, which I think everyone thought was going to be coming anyways. And I'm not sure that, it's like everything. You can't always just place blame on the coach. It's not that way. I mean, are there some things that he maybe got wrong and tactically? And I've been listening to some other podcasts, in and around the World Cup, and even just talking to others in and around the set about what was happening, and not just Carly Lloyd, because she said everything she said publicly, but even other people like Ari Hingst, who played for Germany and won World Cups, and understanding what their culture and how they view it, and criticism and public criticism and whatnot. And I think for the United States, and I was listening to Julie Foudy the other day, who, if you talk about, you want to go to someone who's won it and been there and done that and lived it and understands it. Like she said, she arrived back in the United States and she went off to do the Little League World Series, and everyone wanted to talk to her about it. And they were talking about moving on. And she was like, no, let's just sit in it for a minute, because that's how you learn. I'm not ready to move on yet. Like you sit in it, you learn from it, you feel and embrace the criticism, the feeling of losing, of, it's like we've seen other players. We've seen this with Minnesota United. Remember when Atlanta US Open Cup final, and some of the veteran players stood on the field and watched Atlanta get their trophies, because there's something sometimes about feeling that you never want to feel that again. And so I think for some of the US players, without having ever been at that level and in that situation before, but just being a competitor, like sometimes I think that maybe that's what they need to do. They need to just evaluate that. And I think that's why people got mad that they were taking selfies and dancing after even the game that was a draw against Portugal. I feel like people didn't feel like they were really taking that hard as a competitor, that they didn't perform the way they should perform, that they didn't get the result that they needed. And then, this wasn't just a millimeter penalty kick shootout loss to Sweden. This was like 3 games in group stage where you didn't take care of what you needed to do. So I think they just need to reevaluate. Maybe, I don't know what that looks like, because they have this insane amount of talent and the world isn't catching up. I think they've caught up. I think they're there. And so they're going to have to figure out what is really meaningful. And you can't make someone be competitive. You can't make someone feel it. You can't make someone do that. So it's going to maybe take some leadership in this younger squad to feel that and to get to that place. I don't think it is just coaching and tactics and substitution patterns and whatnot. I think you have to have people that really just don't ever want to feel that way again. And we'll see if that happens. And you won't know until you get in this position again. You won't know until you get into the next major tournament. You really won't. There's no way in that setup, in that path, that's going to change that. And CONCACAF's getting harder too. So we'll see when they qualify. I mean, Mexico women didn't qualify this last time. So
right.
It'll be interesting to see, what happens in this next cycle. And you cannot just rely on talent, and you have to really have that grind and that want to never feel that way again. We'll see if that happens. There's no magical wand. It's going to have, it's sort of an innate thing. And that's why Carly was always so criticized, is because she didn't care who she stomped on in her path. Like she had one goal in mind, and that was to win. And, I'm not sure that all of them have that same desire. I think some of them do, but we'll see next time around. But either way, it's going to be a fantastic final. It'll be a great one. I'm looking forward to it. Spain and England. We'll see. Spain got trounced by Japan. I did that game, but they rebounded nicely and they look really good. And, England has grown into the tournament and has some real quality, even though they're missing some major pieces. They have found a way. And I think Serena Wigman is fantastic. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for the final. It should be great. I know we've got, we got to talk about the Leagues Cup. And so maybe you are going to be staying on here for the next segment because I think Adrian's jumping on at 1:00, and that way we can get our Leagues Cup conversation in, since you guys have been deep in it for the last month and I've not. So, but I know what, we can talk about England too, because I don't know. I know it came home. What was it? 1966, as much as we don't want to relive it. I know you do, but I don't know if we do.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my next question. I didn't realize Adrian was coming on in 4 minutes, which is hilarious because I thought we had more time. But shocker, you and I talking football for longer than we should have done. Serena Wigman, for me, there was a suggestion today that the Football Association in England have said, actually, we're monitoring her very closely to possibly take over the men's program should Gareth Southgate move aside over the next few years. That's massive, Kate. That's huge for a place like England to recognise that. If that were to occur, would that not be one of the biggest moments in the history of women's football?
100%. And I mean, this woman, all she does is win everywhere she goes. No matter what point she takes over a team. I mean, she did it with Netherlands. She's done it in Euros. She's done it at World Cups. She's done it at Olympics. Like, and she played it at UNC. She did it herself. So I just think, like, you look at her pedigree, but not only that, just like the guts to make tactical changes, the guts to make decisions and have hard conversations when we go back to communication, leaving players off that she doesn't feel are ready or are right for the group, but she communicates it correctly in huddles, during injuries, at halftime, during stoppage time, during this, during that, like in the huddle, having real conversations. And not to say that there weren't a lot of tremendous coaches in this last Women's World Cup, but the fact that you have a woman that's doing that, because there's not a whole lot of women's coaches in this World Cup, let alone across the board. And then if she were to get hired for the men's job, I think it would be massive. And I'm not just because I also think she could be the best person for the job. I mean, how many times have you and I said, I want more women's coaches. I want more women's broadcasters. I want more this, but you have to be the best person for the job at the end of the day. And I think if she could be that person for the men's side, and it would be phenomenal. It would be next level. So we'll see what she does in the final, but I was incredibly impressed with her, and I haven't heard, a negative thing about her. So hopefully it comes to fruition. And first they got to win the final, because I'll tell you what, the US would love to have her. I mean, we've heard rumors and sprinklings of who's going to replace MNUFC and who would you want, especially if it was a woman, a female coach. And her name has absolutely been floated out there, but I'm sure that England is going to do their very best to keep her right where she's at, whether it's with the men or the women.
Get your paws off of her. No chance. There's no way.
What a coup that would be. And then they come back and win the World Cup. Yeah.
There's no way the FA are going to let her go. There's no way.
Especially to the US. I got to tell you one funny story before we get Adrian on here. I don't know if he's in the waiting room or not, but speaking of like sort of just vitriol against the United States in all fashions, we were watching the US-Sweden game in a restaurant, in a bar just down the street from our hotel. And it was John Strong, our producer, Zach, and our researcher, Eric. And we're sitting there watching, and there's a couple, US fans sprinkled around. And then, but the whole bar was packed, and there was people outside. Everyone was having a great time. Nobody else watching the game that's outside or anything, just watching it. Well, goes to penalty kicks. And all of a sudden, every time the US missed, and Sweden scored, the whole place erupts. Everybody became a Sweden fan in that one moment. It was hilarious. I'm like, all of a sudden we were like, oh, okay. Like, where did you all come from? It's funny. I mean, I'm sure you've witnessed that time and time again when you've been in all these, soccer places, even at Brits, I'm sure, during the Men's World Cup. There's something about just this. People like to see the United States fail in any way, shape, or form, and especially when it comes to women's soccer.
Well, when it goes back to your earlier point about rooting for the underdog as well, and there's a similar situation with England from the men's football perspective. When you go to these major tournaments, I remember going to Euro 2016, France, and I had a couple of days where I was a fan and was there with my wife and a couple of pals. And we ended up watching, I think it was England-Russia, I think it was, on a huge screen underneath the Eiffel Tower. It was glorious.
Sounds terrible.
Well, naturally it rained, so if that makes you feel better. So we're all there in our waterproofs with a couple of beers and stuff, and it was grand. It was really, really good fun. But when Russia scored, it felt like the majority of the fans there watching were all jumping up and down, celebrating against England. And I think it's this whole superiority complex where obviously the United States, the women's national team, have been the top dogs for a long, long time. And England the men's side for England haven't necessarily been the top dogs, but there is an arrogance about the England men's national team for sure. And I think a lot of people are always okay with them when they are scored on. And maybe it's the same with the US women's national team, where because they've been so good for so long, people want to see the underdog do well. I don't know, but to answer the question, I've certainly been in those situations as well, for sure.
Yeah, I know. And it's, that's what makes sports fun. That's why we love sports, the nature of the unknown, that you don't know who's going to win the game. You don't know the outcome. And it's moments like those. And Sweden's not necessarily like the poor man, down at the bottom of the totem pole, but in general, every city we went to, we found, especially when we would have a team that was playing against a Haiti, a Nigeria, South Africa, a Panama, like those moments where people didn't have a horse in the race, they're for sure cheering for the underdog. I mean, the crowd, Colombia, the crowds would just erupt every time players from those teams would touch the ball and have an opportunity. So it was a lot of fun. But yeah, we'll see what happens with the US team. And I know we're going to switch gears here and talk a little Leagues Cup, because I think that's been a massive part of the last month. Getting on back on track. I cannot believe it's like crazy watching all these results happen and seeing like what Miami has done, and yet they're still sitting at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. So yes. I don't know if they'll find a way to keep going here once the points actually matter towards the regular season. But either way, it's been fun to sort of see the Messi mania and the Leagues Cup mania from afar. So we'll come back with segment number 2. Adrian Heath is going to join us next. Segment number 2 coming up. We'll talk all things Leagues Cup right here on MLS on Sound of the Loons. Looking for a way to get closer to your club? For just $25, Loons fans can join the Preserve, Minnesota United's official season ticket waitlist. Waiting usually isn't fun, but this waitlist comes with benefits. Being a member of the Preserve gives you early access to MNUFC single game tickets, partial season plans, and group tickets, as well as special pre-sales for other marquee events that come to Allianz Field. Visit MNUFC.com/preserve to join. Welcome back, everybody. Segment number 2 of Sound of the Loons. This is like the good old days. We just have the band back together again. We've got Callum Williams. We got Adrian Heath jumping on. And then we get to kind of run through a new thing, even though it's the band getting back together again, the new thing of Leagues Cup. So we're going to kind of rehash what Leagues Cup was, how it went. We all knew, the promotions, the idea behind it, the competition behind it, the pause of the MLS regular season schedule for this specific tournament. But now we get to kind of hear it from the horse's mouth, from Adrian Heath, kind of what your take, because we know what it felt like from a promotional commercial standpoint and what the league was pitching. But from a coach's standpoint, how did you feel that this went compared to what you thought it was going to be, just the overall competition and the energy behind it?
Well, I said before the tournament, I thought that the tournament would ramp up as it got to the later stages, and I think that's what happened. We got down to the last 8 out of 47, so I presume another 39 teams would have preferred to be where we were when we were in Nashville last Friday. Can't deny that was a huge disappointment, because, up until the sending off, the game was really in the balance. But as I said to the players, I couldn't let that mask the fact that we gave 3 or 4 really poor goals away, which has been unlike us of late. But when I look back at the tournament, we had some big nights. I thought we had a couple of great evenings at Allianz. I thought the Puebla, considering we were down to 10 men for an hour to win the game 4-0, and then we had the penalty shootout with Toluca, which was another really good game. And then, another man sent off. And then we go to the Columbus game, which was a great game of football and had everything, with the penalty shootout going ahead and then looking like we were going to get knocked out. So I think overall, I was pleased with the way that we approached the games, pleased with the way we played, apart from maybe an hour of the last game. And I think overall the tournament's been a real success. One thing I think we have to mention is looking at some of the attendances of some of the stadiums. I think that our supporters can give themselves a big pat on the back, because we had great support in every game that we had at the Allianz, and to the extent that the Mexican teams mentioned the support and the atmosphere within the ground. So I think there was a lot of really good nights at home. And we all remember penalty shootouts when you win. Not so much when you lose, but it was, they were memorable nights.
Yeah, I think one of the main takeaways I've had from the whole Leagues Cup is that it's just been this wonderful mixture of the Americas for the very first time. And I'd certainly like to get Adrian's thoughts a little later on about how we can capitalize on that. But in terms of the tournament itself, Adrian, I'm assuming it will go down as a success for Minnesota. Yes, obviously it was a harrowing defeat to Nashville, but regardless, you've done well and beaten a lot of very good teams, and you've shown a different side of yourselves on the international stage against the likes of Puebla and Toluca, have you not?
I think so. I think also we've put the club in good light. I think everybody who came, Cal, and we had some of the South American journalists and commentators amazed at the stadium, thought the stadium was awesome, thought the atmosphere that we generated within the stadium was awesome as well. So I think that, as I said, I think the club can take an awful lot of plaudits from the way that the tournament's gone. I actually think, Cal, that Kyndra, this could be the beginning of a really big tournament. I think for the first time, everybody is fully aware of what Major League Soccer's about. I think there was always that thought that maybe 2 or 3 of the teams are not bad, but not as good as the Mexican teams. That was the general consensus, I would think. And now I think that narrative has changed considerably. The fact that we've got 2 MLS clubs in the final, the fact that you've seen some of the heavy defeats for some of the Mexican teams, I think all bodes well for the growth of the game in Major League Soccer. And I think it's only going to be a positive moving forward. I certainly think if we do it again and we do it in the US, the Mexican teams will take it an awful lot more seriously than they might have done coming into the tournament.
When you look at how you approach this tournament, because again, I know the MLS regular season is taking a month off, but it's still a month in the middle of your regular season when you're trying to manage minutes, you're trying to get guys back, you're dealing with injuries, you're trying to make your way up the table in the Western Conference. The way you approach the game, and then sort of what the mentality of the group was, and then also now how you're coming out of it, knowing that you made a fantastic run, but now it's back to business and trying to continue up that Western Conference. What's that mindset for the group? How did it start? How did it end? And then how are now you going back into the regular season?
Well, I think once we got over the disappointment of last Friday, that you look at the tournament as a whole and you go, where was it for us? And we've touched on some of the positives. I think there's been some really good performances. I think, when I think Josef Rosales has had a really good tournament. Bongi put his name probably firmly on the map in more than just America. I think that people in South America now are fully aware of Emmanuel Reynoso's talent. So I think there's been a lot of positives from a playing point of view, a lot of positives from the stadium and the game day atmosphere. But I think as the tournament progressed, the thing that for me was you saw how disappointed Monterrey were when they went out. You saw how disappointed that Club America were when they went out. And I think that is a takeaway for me, because I've been here 13 years now, I think, in the States. And I remember maybe about 7 or 8 years ago watching Seattle get dismantled by Club America with a certain Darwin Quintero, terrorizing Seattle that night. The league has come an awful long way from that, not just with the stadium, with the game day atmosphere, but I think when I look at the quality of players, the quality of the coaches, the quality of the tactics being introduced by some of the coaches, I think, it's been nothing but a big success. As I said to the players, now we've got 7 in the next 12 games at home. We're probably going to have to win 5 of them, I would think, maybe get another draw. So, we've got it all on now. It's, we've got Seattle, Colorado, San Jose, Sporting, St. Louis, San Jose again, Galaxy, all Western Conference teams to play, everything to play for. And, the fact that we've made the playoffs the last 4 years, Kyndra, I can't tell everybody how much I want to keep that run going. I want to make it 5 out of 5 to be the only team that's done it. So, we've got some really big games coming up, and now we need the likes of Reynoso and Pukki and Bongi. We need them to come to the fore and actually help us get over the line and give ourselves an opportunity again.
A bit of a double pivot question here for you, Gaffer. Number one, you mentioned Bongo Kutre Hlongwane. First and foremost, why did it work so well for him during Leagues Cup? And secondly, what did you and your staff learn in Leagues Cup? Because it was, for one or two of them, it was the first time they would have coached against international opposition. So what did the coaching staff take away from the tournaments?
Well, I think one of the things that we've always thought, and it's something I've certainly thought of when I've watched Mexican teams play in the US, they're really, really tactical. They're very, very good tactically. I think that they ask questions of you that not a lot of MLS teams do. When I look at the Toluca game, you look at the difference of playing Toluca down 10 men in Puebla, it was night and day. They suddenly stretched us out all over the field. They put another body in midfield. So even though we were trying to, go 4-4-1 and make it tight, wherever we had 2 players, they had 3. Wherever we had 4, they added a fifth. So I think tactically they were very, very good. I think also that their ball retention, they take care of the ball and don't turn it over as much as MLS teams do. And I think that's something that we've learned, that if you gave the ball away, like say to Toluca, they might string 60, 50, 40 passes together before you get it back. That never really happens. So it doesn't happen very often in the MLS. So that was, I thought, was a subtle difference. I thought one of the positives from the MLS side was, I think, the athleticism, the pace of the game, and just the way that the MLS teams approach the game on the front foot, playing in your face, not giving you time. I think that was a little bit of a culture shock for some of the Mexican teams. When some of the games got out of hand, when going to 4 and 5, I think that was because of the intensity that the MLS teams bring. So I think they've probably learned some stuff as well, Cal. But I think anything that's a learning curve that that you've learned something from is worth experiencing.
But then what about Hlongwane as well? Why did it work so well for him?
Well, he's done it all season. He's getting himself in the good spots, through his own endeavour, his own work rate, getting in them one-touch finishing areas, getting right in front of the goal, working off Pukki. When Pukki makes that near post run and takes the centre off with him, can I exploit that space from the opposite side? And he did really, really well at that. So I think he introduced himself to a far bigger audience, as Ray did. Some of the stuff Ray produced in the tournament was exceptional. So, yeah, I think it's been a good tournament from that point of view.
And just to sort of put a bow on Leagues Cup before we move into the rest of the season for you guys, and you already previewed it a little bit in general, what you guys have coming up against Western Conference opponents specifically. But when you look at how the Leagues Cup is going to wrap up, and you said 2 MLS teams in the final, which I don't know that anybody would have predicted, but would you have thought that that it was going to go this way, that Miami would make the run that they did, regardless of who they have on their roster, that a player like Messi and company would have made such an impact in such an immediate time when it's 11 guys on the field? Or would you thought that, you know, Philly would go out the way they did, that Nashville would, you know, win that game the way they did? Like, how did you see this coming, and what do you think of the final?
I think the big surprise, you can't forget about Messi. The big surprise has been Miami. The one thing I will say, and I think somehow it's been forgotten a little bit in the euphoria of watching Messi do what he's doing, is, you know, you're talking about Busquets, 100 odd caps, won everything. You're talking about Jordi Alba, 100 odd caps, won everything. And then you're talking about the 322s. Their roster's not the same roster. This isn't the Miami team that's bottom of the league. You know, this is a completely different, virtually team. I was incredibly surprised about Philly's performance. I think that they proved when they changed it again at half-time and went back to what we all know Philly are, and, you know, they make it so uncomfortable for you. I think that, hey, we're all experts in hindsight. Hindsight United has never lost a game. I know that. But, you know, I think if you're in the quiet of the day, just ask Jim, does he wish he'd have been able to go back to the way he started the second half? I'm sure he would have said yes. Obviously, it was a big blow for, I mean, the likes of Carranza, who was injured, etc., for them. But no, you can't take away that Messi's come up huge when they've needed him. I think Joseph's had a new lease of life, and now where they used to turn the ball over in really dangerous areas in their own defensive half, they're very, very assured and very, very calm now. The keeper's had an unbelievable tournament as well. You know, I think he's one of the sort of unsung heroes, really, of the group, because I think back to Cruz Azul game, they should have been 4 down before, you know, Messi even came on the field. So, you know, they've done incredibly well. I still think Nashville might have enough on them, but I've said that against Philly and I said it against Dallas, so maybe I'm the fool here, but, you know, it's going to be really interesting how it goes.
Just one more on Leagues Cup. I think one of the most interesting things I noticed, Kay, as a spectator on that Friday night when Miami played Cruz Azul, we have had some spectacular moments in this league over the years. When Beckham signed, when Zlatan scored that goal, his first goal, when he volleyed it from 40 yards out. We've had some unbelievable moments. And yes, those clips went around the world, but it felt as though it was limited from an audience perspective. It was very much out there to the domestic audience, which is great. But I think for the very first time, that Friday night fixture, with Messi making his debut, it felt as though it was a global event. And I know there were people in the UK watching. I know there were people overseas in Asia watching. I'm sure, Kay, when you were in Australia, people were watching as well. It felt as though for the very first time, legitimately, the eyeballs of the world were on football in North America. And then Messi gave us the picture-perfect moment as well. It's been sensational, Leagues Cup has, and I agree, Gaffer. I think it's only going to get bigger and better. I do think over the next few years, especially with the Copa America coming here to the United States next year, and then obviously the World Cup, I wonder, is the conversation going to be had at some stage where we potentially see the introduction of the likes of Boca Juniors, of Palmeiras and Flamengo and what have you in the tournament? That would be very interesting. But the question I have for you finally, Gaffer, is legitimately now you have to think about this. Next year, when Minnesota United play into Miami, what on earth do you do? How do you even begin to prepare to mark and limit somebody like Lionel Messi? Is there an answer apart from kicking lumps?
Well, I'll give you a couple of things, Kel, which I thought everything you said there was very legitimate. I think one of the things that surprised me, if somebody said to me, "Are you amazed Messi's come and scored the goals he's gone?" I've gone, well, he's got 700 odd league goals in his career. He scored 1 and 2 in Paris last year. He's just won the World Cup only 4 or 5 months ago.
Right.
Everybody has tried to stop him over the last 10, 12 years. But guess what? It's quite difficult because he's really, really good. He's, you know, I know I'm biased for my generation. I think that Maradona's the greatest footballer of all time. But we're legitimately talking about somebody who might be the greatest footballer that's ever played the game. No disrespect to Beckham, no disrespect to Zlatan. They aren't in that conversation. And going back to you saying that the world's eyes was on the North America, you're right, Cal, because of who it is. You know, this guy has been incredible for the last, 10, 12 years that we've watched him virtually single-handedly win nearly every tournament you can on his own. 7 times gold, Ballon d'Or. 7 times. People forget that. Who are we talking about? So put him with some decent co-stars, if you like, and you've got a pretty good movie coming along, I think. The guy's unbelievable. I would think that I can't wait for us to run out at Allianz and see Lionel Messi playing against us. And we'll see what we can do. But also, I will add, I don't think the team that you're watching now will be anything like the team that Inter Miami have next season as well.
In what sense?
I think that the 3 under-22 players will all be in the team. And I think they will revamp maybe 1 or 2 other spots as well. They've got undoubted pots of money. They've got an owner who's willing to spend it. They're only going to get bigger and stronger. Tata did it before when he had that group of really talented players in Atlanta. He's going to have probably a better cast to work with, I would think, next year. So I think everybody's on warning that we know what's coming. And but the great thing about it is there's probably 3 or 4 other teams that are not going to stand idly by and let them go and do that without putting up a fight. So great for the league. I think, there's nothing that's happened in this last month with Messi and Miami that's been bad for the league. I think it's been fantastic.
I just want to say, too, I think, too, how much does this say about Messi choosing to come to MLS? And I know this has been rehashed, but now that you're seeing even more players move to Saudi Arabia and players like Neymar and the numbers and the fact, and then maybe they're sitting over there, even Ronaldo might be sitting over there going, wow, look at how much fun Messi's having over there. He's not making $1 billion a year, but his family is happy and he's hugging his kids after the game. Like, you can't put a number and a value on that and how much joy he seems to be having in this league.
I think that's one of the few things, Kyndra, that has stuck out more than anything for me. You can tell he's enjoying being where he is. His reaction when the young kid, what's his name, Marashka, whatever, the young boy, 17, 18-year-old, when he scored the winning goal against Dallas and Messi's running over. Can you imagine for a young Argentinian kid, Messi's running from the halfway line to jump on your back because you've just scored a goal? I think, and that for me has been the huge surprise, that he looks as though he's really enjoying his football, enjoying where he is. I saw the quote from Tata today saying he's far more relaxed and happy, and that's the way he's playing. So it's going to be tough for Gary Smith and all the guys the weekend, but no doubt Smudger and Steve Guppy will be coming up with a plan, and it should be a great evening, great atmosphere, I think, as well.
I'm sure Walker will give him a few kicks here and there.
I'm sure he will.
He's not opposed to doing that.
I think it was Jim who said that if we only tackle him once in the first half, we'll lose the game. So I see that, that the other night Philly didn't let him have it all his own way, but that's the only way sometimes you can stop these great players.
Speaking of great players, you've got quite a few on your roster, and moving on to the rest of MLS regular season, you've got New York City coming up. We've talked a lot about Western Conference opponents. You go East first. Yeah. But what does this team look like? What's the health of the group? How does everybody seem to be fitting in? How is the group that hasn't even played necessarily much MLS yet transition into MLS from Leagues Cup? And what do you see from this group in the second half? Not even second half. You said it. What do you have, 12 games left?
12 games left, yeah. We've got 7 at home. As I said, we're probably going to have to win at least 5, I would think. So, we know what's ahead of us. New York City are what they are. They've changed the shape pretty consistently. They've had a back 3, then it's become a back 4, then they've had 3 up front, then they've had 2. I think the fact that Maxi Morales is back, I would think that he would be introduced in a number 10 role, whether that be with a back three or a back four, I don't know. But we know what they're going to be like. They'll spread us out. They want to play with the ball, and they're really good with the ball. Obviously, we've watched some of their video, and we think there's certain areas where we feel as though we can maybe work to our advantage. But the most important thing is the way that we approach the game. I know that if we're going to realise all our ambitions between now and the end of the season, the likes of Reynoso, Pukki and Bongi have got to continue playing well, scoring goals. And if we do that, we'll give ourselves a chance. But hey, now, as I say, we've got 7 games out of 12 at home. It's in our own hands.
Let me ask you about New York City FC a little more in depth then, Gaffer, because everything seems to come from the centre of their midfield, which has been occupied by James Sands and Keaton Parks for the majority of the campaign. Now, obviously, they've sold a couple of players. Pereira went over to Qatar in the Middle East in a big money move. They've replaced him sort of with Julian Fernandez, who's coming from Bel Air Sarsfield, only 19. Are they lacking a little bit of depth in the wide areas now? Because Talish Magno, whilst I think more suited in a wider role, isn't a traditional winger, is he? He's much more of an inverted player.
Yeah, and he's played centre forward a lot for him this year as well, Cal, like a withdrawn 9, if you like. And I think, as you've just said there, that the one thing that's the uncertainty for us going into the game is they have changed it an awful lot. They've been inconsistent consistent in their inconsistency, if you like, of their starting 11. It's been, a back 3 with 5 in midfield with 2 up top. Then it's been a 3-4-3. Then it's been a 4-2-3-1. It's, so whatever team they put out, they generally try and possess the ball. They want to be a possession-oriented team. They try and get their little overloads, whether it be in wide areas or through the middle of the park. I think it's morphing into a new group. Like, we knew what New York City's team was, really, didn't we, for 3 or 4 years? Like you just said, this is changing a little bit now. It's changing off the field as well, because we're going to a new venue, which is something which is unusual. But hey, it is what it is. We know that they're going to be good with the ball. Can we make them the most of our opportunities that arrive when we have the ball? Because I do believe the way we can set up against them would cause them problems.
And then just last one for me is, how does this team, you mentioned Pukki and you mentioned Reynoso, you mentioned Bongi, but how does this team get over that hump, not just making the playoffs 5 years in a row, which, nobody has ever done, but also getting over that hump? Who else needs to be more consistent for you? Not even that has to be like stellar and fabulous, but just you need more consistency to help this team get over that hump. And it can't just be, the guys up front.
Well, I think if you look at Fraga's year, Fraga's hardly scored all year, which is not like him. He's normally in between that 6 and 12 goal range and, making plenty of assists. His season's been a little bit inconsistent. I do believe Asani Dotson is nearly back to what he was prior to his ACL. He's been really good in training. So we're going to need his drive, his physicality. Can we now introduce Ethan Bristow? Can he start to give us some energy down the outside on the left-hand side and start to deliver balls into the box? For me, if we can get 2 or 3 to assist we know that Reynoso can play. We know that Pukki can score. We know that Bongi's scoring and playing particularly well. Can we get Asani to really get to a top level and Fragapani, get another goal scorer on the field? If we can do that, we will give ourselves a really good chance.
I'm curious, Gaffer, if you're going to ask, without giving too much away, if you're going to ask the double pivot, which I'm assuming you'll go with, as you often do, to be a little more reserved, because when you look at the NYCFC team, it looks as if, for the most part, and Kyndra and I have done them sporadically over the year, but they get the majority of the wide threat through the overlapping fullbacks with the likes of Ilinic and Kufre, or sometimes it's Tavon Gray. Yeah. Now I'm wondering, is there going to be an overload in midfield with that 3 behind the 4, with the likes of Rodriguez, with the likes of Talish Magno and now Maxi Morales? Is that an area of concern for you?
Well, it is. And what they've been trying to do, Cal, when they've gone with the 3, they've got the 2 wing-backs as high as possible. So they're occupying your full-back. Then their 2 wide guys then come right narrow and they nearly have a box in midfield. So if you've got a box in midfield and all 4 of them can handle the ball, you have to be in really good spots. Like you say, you've got to be really, really disciplined. our two centre-backs have to know when to go and close into the middle of the pitch, because obviously the two wing-backs are keeping our full-backs occupied. So, yeah, they will ask a lot of questions of us. We need our good defensive block, which we've had at really good times on the road. You know, people talk about the Columbus game. I thought our defensive shape was excellent against a really good Columbus team who play very similar when they play wing-backs to New York City. Now, discipline with the ball, without the ball is going to be huge. And then them little moments, you know, it's always the little moments in games, that little percentage here and there. Can you take your opportunities when they come? Can you defend well for periods of time, which you always have to on the road and not give anything up? If all that happens and we do what we've done, we've proved, I think there's still only two teams that got more points than us on the road in the league. We've proved we can do that, but that's what we're going to have to do again.
Well, Adrian, Cal, I appreciate you guys taking the time. I'm just going to get a prediction on the final, and then you guys, not the World Cup final, I won't make you do that. I just need a prediction on the Leagues Cup final from each of you, and then we can get out of here.
Hey, Cal, have you noticed she's not mentioned the Lionesses in the final? Hey, steered straight away from the women. Hey, the US national women's team. Hey, all we heard was it's a three-peat. It's a three-peat. Not one mention. Have you noticed, Cal?
Hey, trust me, I heard plenty of that over there too, all about the three-peat. And then I had to live amongst the group over there when it didn't happen. The stressing.
Yeah, well,
have you ever been around Ben Grossman when he's stressed out?
No. So football's coming on. The women will win this weekend, and I think it will be really tight. But I think Nashville just might put one over them.
I agree. Football's coming home, and England will win the World Cup. With regards to Leagues Cup, I just can't look past Lionel Messi and him doing not one, not two things, but 3, 4, 5 things individually. Sergio Busquets, as you mentioned, Gaffer, has just provided him the ball so many times in between the lines when he's in between the lines, and either side of who I'm assuming it'll be Dax McCarthy, who's going to be a very busy boy looking after Lionel Messi. But I just can't look past it. I really can't. So I'm going to go Miami 3, Nashville 1.
Ooh, I think, here's one for you. Maybe I'm going to be wrong. I think that Nashville will play a diamond. I think they'll have somebody who gets all over Busquets, and then that will allow the bottom end of the diamond to get in and around Messi. And then the energy from their white guys, you know, whether it be Schaffelberg, whether it be on the other side, Shaq Moore. So, I'm going to throw my cards in here now. I want Gary Smith to win. I want Nashville to win.
Well, you know, and the other thing with that too is you can't forget Annabelle Godoy, because he's not afraid to, you know,
he's not
mess it up a little bit in there.
Yeah, he's not going to be standing on ceremony. Don't worry about that. He's going to get around everybody.
He might be holding on tight to not get that red card. That might be it.
Well, good to see you
guys. Thank you guys both for joining me. Have a good rest of your day, and I look forward to chatting with you again. Sound of the Loons presented by Align Health. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers. See you later.